So thanks for joining us. For anyone out there who may not know who you are and what you're up to these days, would love to have you introduce yourselves. And let's start with Alicia.
All right. Well, good afternoon. I am Alicia Thompson, and I am a retired superintendent from the Wichita Public Schools in Wichita, Kansas. In Wichita, we served about 50,000 students with about 9,000 employees, and we are right in the middle of the country. And so I spent 31 years there as an educator, all the way from paraprofessional in that school district all the way to superintendent of the school district for the last 8 years.
Well, first off, it's a privilege to be with both of you this afternoon, and I've gotten to know both of you over the last year, and so this is a kind of a treat for me. I am also retired 1 year into my retirement, and feel pretty good about my decision in the fact of retiring as a school superintendent after 38 years in education, and now getting to be a part of a group called Education Partners. And so we try to help out superintendents with the challenges of what this job represents each and every day. My background is I was a superintendent in 3 different school districts, a small district right in the middle of Denver, Colorado, that was about 2 miles by 2 miles, called Sheridan School District. I was a superintendent in Bentonville School District, which was kind of the outlier in my career of a very well-to-do district, growing very rapidly and actually really great resources. And then was a part of a state takeover where the governor and commissioner were my boss, and I was in the Little Rock School District, and proud to say that we got them out of state control, have a local control board back, and systems in place to make that place continue to move forward. So that's a quick span of my career.
So we're chatting today about generally about technology, education technology, and how we can prepare students for a real focused future that will inevitably include technology that they use themselves, that they may actually help build in the future. And I kind of wonder what comes to your mind. What's the first thing that comes to mind for each of you when thinking about preparing students for a world of work that is essentially going to be ever-changing and filled with various forms and uses of technology?
Yeah. Well, the first things that come to my mind is really exciting. There's lots of opportunities when you think of technology and it being a tool and a way that students are engaging and learning. But on the other hand, another word that comes to my mind would be caution, making sure that we take our time, we do our research, we make sure that we have infrastructures in place to make sure that things are secure enough for folks to be able to use it and feel safe doing so.
I think a big part of our conversation today, Alicia, is going to be about getting people grounded and comfortable, because obviously this puts everyone a little bit on edge. But when you think about grounded, you almost have to start when you think about this whole thing of bringing technology in the classroom. You still need to have people literate. We've got to have an effort to make sure that what we're doing for pre-K programs and what we're doing in K-3 is creating learners that are then able to use all these wonderful options of technology tools. So I do want to start there, that we've got to have that. And then the second thing is that we just have to be so much more thoughtful when we think about tech tools. It's really about taking away the control of a teacher to be the one that's 95% doing the work, and doing it so we have classrooms where that's a flipped model, which we've all heard about. But, as we are superintendents and principals and even teachers, we really go evaluate ourselves to say how many classrooms are allowing kids to be really engaged and active in their learning. That, to me, is the foundational piece. And it actually will create a comfort level for the kids, if nothing else. It may make our adults feel a little bit awkward, but that's really where we need to be.
I think, many of us make, especially teachers, in fact, make assumptions that, well, they know how to use these devices. They know how to use all these different apps. Certainly some devices, but may not know all about those devices or all of the apps. And so we make a lot of assumptions. So that's to preface a question around what do schools need to do and districts need to do to really prepare students for, again, a technology-saturated future, but one where they have the skills to be able to learn?
When I think about that, I think that's such an opportunity. But I also want to be real that since 2005, I really only feel like we've gotten more serious about professional learning communities over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of doing it with integrity. And we're probably still not as proficient at that at the secondary level as we want to be. But that is a mechanism because, when you're working with colleagues and you're able to share resources and you're able to share techniques, when you're able to look at different technologies and use the skill sets of the group, all of a sudden, instead of being fractured, you kind of become whole. And so, a lot of times we think about professional learning communities as the vehicle that is going to drive achievement forward for an individual student, but it's also the vehicle to create the best practice to have that happen to drive those students forward. And certainly technology has to be a component of that. And frankly, there's going to be some early adopters to technology that are teachers, and some are going to be reluctant. And again, the team working as a unit should be the group that actually help propel everything forward and work through some of the challenges of integrating technology on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Mike about the professional learning and the community and the collaboration. It's going to take us working together to be able to implement the things we need to do to integrate that technology. But I will move on to the technical pieces to this that school districts need to make sure that they do, is to provide a tool. Where I come from, a lot of the students in my district didn't have technology. They didn't have internet access. So as a school district, we need to work either collaboratively with other partners across our cities and states to make sure that we have tools in every student's hand, along with the device, out of the internet access, high-speed internet access, to make sure that they're able to use that. And I do believe, again, that teacher, student, and not just the teacher and the student, but we also need to integrate the parents into the training and the professional learning for students for safety reasons in all kinds of ways. And then to make sure that we have the security infrastructure to protect our students and our staffs as they're using this technology and using new things. And then to continue to have a group of folks that are actually researching and looking for best practices and the do's and the don'ts and creating those policies and things that we need so that we can be able to integrate technology and move forward cautiously and effectively.
If there's some positives that came out of the pandemic, is that most school districts really were able to do things to get to a one-on-one situation. So that's extremely positive. Of course, now for leaders, we have to start thinking about replacements and where do those costs come from, and the unity that should exist between a school district, a community, as Alicia said, but also our state and federal government to make sure that resources are going to come towards this so that we continue to move forward with technology. We have a long ways to go on, broadband when you look across the United States. And I in particular think a lot of times of rural communities where, things are very challenging. I know our state has made that a priority, and we've elevated a great deal under former Governor Hutchinson to get so the broadband, we're not last. We're not in the bottom 5 anymore. I believe I think I saw a ranking that we're somewhere in the top 20 now as a state, which is a positive for Arkansas. But, that type of concerted effort to say there's an issue, this is an economic mobility factor, it's an economic growth situation for states. This shouldn't just be left to school districts to help solve it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. What technology, and let's say in the last 5 years, what technology has really, from your perspective, impacted in a positive way student learning and/or teacher effectiveness?
Some of the tools that we are finding that are helpful to us are ones that solve the teacher shortage problem. And what I mean by that is that we're utilizing tools where we're able to have a teacher positioned in a location, but able to deliver instruction across different campuses, per se, or even at someone's home, right? So we find that technology that allows us to do that has been helpful, in particular career technical ed, foreign language programs. Those are some that come to mind. Also tools that help us to shadow in the workplace, right? There are some places that won't allow young students to participate per se in a space such as the aviation industry. Being able to use technology tools to be able to do that shadowing, even in the zoos, the San Diego Zoo. We're in Kansas, but we had students shadow at the San Diego Zoo, NASA. All of those places are great tools, whatever tools we're using, and there's a variety of them that people can use to be able to do that. And then the new one that everybody's kind of have some controversial around is that Chat GPT. We have allowed our teachers to begin to get some professional development. We have a small group in our district that are using it for lesson planning, for differentiation of instruction, communicating with parents, to creating letters, things of that nature, just the general things, just to kind of dip our toe into that just a snitch. And so those are some of the tools that I know that a lot of people are in the tech spaces are starting to use and explore and collaborate with each other around those particular ones that I mentioned.
I love Alicia's answer and what she's done in her district. I tell you that I think that one of the things that I'm just blown away with that is, kids are fascinated by is the whole 3D technology and 3D printers and, what they're able to construct and create and build, and then to be able to have interactions with people in the industry to show, how construction companies are, laying foundation now with 3D technology. It's pretty amazing. I met with a company today that asked to try to figure out how to coordinate as they are developing a project. And it's, again, it's another construction company, to be honest with you. And this construction company was saying, as we build the building, how could we develop a curriculum so that students could take part in the process and understand some of the dynamics of it from all ends, and having it go not just into a construction class, but into a 9th grade English class, 10th grade math, whatever it might be. And so I love the fact that companies are starting to think that way, of helping integrate and then use some tech tools, again, because as Alicia's sharing, they're not going to be able to go out of that construction side, but maybe once during a semester, but they're going to be able to have something called, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, BIM technology, BIM. And what it does is allows a student to see all the wiring and all the different mechanisms that are going to use to make that building function in a good way. I think those kind of things ignite kids' heads. It's a tool that even if we as adults don't totally understand it, we can take the ride with them, and actually we can all learn together.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you. I've often said, and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing others, that have said something to the effect of great technology implemented poorly is not something that we want. I'd rather have even mediocre technology implemented well, right? So the concept of implementation as being a critical factor in whatever technology can potentially impact teaching and learning. And so again, implementation matters, I guess is the kind of summary statement. How do you see, especially teaching and learning technology, being implemented well? Like what are the contributors, the factors, the conditions, if you will, that need to be in place for technology to truly be sticky and impactful in our classrooms?
We can't forget that we have outcomes. We have things that are standards that we've got to, move towards for our students. We want them to be as prepared as possible for our next grade level. We want them prepared for post-secondary opportunities. And so we have standards that we need to meet, and that can happen with inside of a curriculum. It can happen in terms of some of the skill sets that, our colleges, universities, and business community wants our students to leave our campuses with. So we can't forget that we've got to have these kind of overarching goals that we need to think about. And then, I look at it in terms of, when I try to make decisions about technology is, what's the shelf life? I want to know who else has bought this product so that I can go talk to them and make sure that I understand, the pluses and the challenges. What's the professional development need behind the purchase of the tool? And then, what is it how it will interrelate with either some of our other tech tools or within, our data management system within the school district.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And again, I'll go right back. Everything he said, but I'm just going to add a little piece. And that is, you got to get your teacher buy-in. However you have to do that. because without them, nothing goes, right? And so we have to include them in the process from the very beginning of the purchasing of it, how the professional development rolls out, how slow or how fast we push this into the system. I just think that they are a critical role in that as well. And I won't remiss to say also our students have to be part of that process as well, because they partake of all the learning. And so we want to make sure that we're including them in that process. And of course, everything that Mike said is right on point.
Yeah. Yeah. One form of technology that we haven't touched on yet, I don't think, is the technology that supports communication, whether you're 3, 30, or my parents' age in your 70s, we're all using some form of, to some degree, social media. And that is a communication device that can be used to great advantage, I think, for teachers as well as learners and even administrators. But it also can be weaponized in some cases by students and maybe even adults to do harm versus supporting the teaching learning process. Alicia, I know you've thought about this, perhaps implemented some policy in Wichita schools. How do you think of the use of social media as both a way to support teaching and learning, and maybe a caution that we need to have in schools and districts?
We actually use common sense media, which is we use the portion of the digital citizenship. And what that is free lessons and activities that help students build essential habits for digital safety. It's media balance, teaching them the balance of how much time to be on, versus interacting with others, because sitting on the computer behind that screen and not interacting with others is not so cool all the time. And online privacy, on how to keep themselves safe there, digital footprint, whatever you put out there, when somebody's looking for you for a job, it's going to still be there. So be careful about what you're doing there. The cyberbullying, communication, and news and media literacy. So we spend a lot of time certifying our schools with those lessons. And so we actually, you can get actually a distinction underneath common sense media around how much education you do. And then they also have a common sense media has a parent component as well, so that the parents are learning how to keep their students safe at home in some of those same spaces that I mentioned before. And that is like the most important thing that you need to do prior to rolling out or integrating any type of technology or any social media spaces. You've got to do those things first in order to be able to do that in a safe and effective way.
I will share on my end, when I think about this type of technology and using social media, is that if we don't tell our story, somebody else surely will. And that could be an extreme challenge. And that, whether it's at a school level or at a district level, it is just critical that we are proactive in our approach to using social media to shoot out our story. And there are so many wonderful things happening inside of our schools, inside of our school districts on a day-to-day basis. We should be overwhelming people with the positive. And, when we don't, I know for a fact in Little Rock, the day that we got beat up the most by some of our critics would be on Sunday. Why? Because they knew that we weren't as active that day, so their voice could be seen. And guess what? They're going to hashtag us on everything to say hashtag LRSD or add LRSD's Twitter handle. But, it gets overcome by doing all the positives, and that creates this wave. The other thing that I think we did really well in Little Rock that I think might be helpful to some others is we actually held Twitter town halls. And during the Twitter town halls, we had multiple platforms going. We were using Facebook Live. We were doing Twitter. We had Instagram happening. And we even had Twitter town halls with students. And so we talked about real relevant issues for them. And I think that our community really appreciated that. I think our kids had a fun time engaging in it. You almost wish that there could be other ways to have that student voice come out more frequently. And I think that is happening within some of our classes. And the final thing I'll mention on this topic is let's not just think about this as a high school thing that kids need to be doing. To Alicia's point about, building up a skill set that has them understanding what it is to be safe, that can start as early as kindergarten with these kids. Because I got a grandbaby, and my grandbaby, she knows how to get around on any device that I put in front of her instantly, even if she's never been on it. All of a sudden, she's moving. She has no fear. That's a positive, but there also needs to be some other things that create foundational skills so that she will be safe.
Let's dig in a little bit further on the safety part and maybe even security part. So school, certainly higher ed's seeing a lot of these challenges with regard to security of student information, let alone employee information. That is having attacks, meaning foreign folks, meaning folks outside of the institution. I don't mean foreign in terms of international, but folks that are gaining access to secure systems such as the student information system or HR payroll systems. That's starting to happen now in K-12. We've heard, LAUSD and others where they've had attacks and where data needs to be safe and secure. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you, are there personnel that districts need to more deeply invest in to help out? Are there ed tech or technology companies that districts should partner with? How do you think of protecting information, PII, personally identifiable information, such that it doesn't get into the wrong hands and used inappropriately?
Okay. Well, first off, we'll share that Little Rock Schools, this is last year, during the year, actually had a data breach and had to pay a ransom for this. This happened right before Christmas. So this was a very real thing that occurred. And, it's a very hard thing to track to say, why did that happen? But one of the things we probably all could be more aware of is that every social media channel that someone can use actually has different privacy settings. It's even good information for parents to understand. So Facebook is going to be different than Instagram, than Snapchat. And so every single thing is a little bit different. And, that's just a reality. But for us as school systems, we probably, and this may make some people a little nervous, but I actually think we can get tighter in how we handle some of our security measures. We need to probably approach it more like a business in terms of some of the security protections, even the banks, and that may be, to your point, Todd, of we shouldn't be afraid to hire some folks from, outside the ed world to do this element, because this is just it's a whole new world. It's happening fast, and it can be costly, as has been seen with these districts. So I think that's a component of this. But the other thing that I would share that does make sense to me is that I'm going to do a plug again for Cami. So but a commercial in that when you can get a product that does so much for the things that educators need to have in their hands, that's an invaluable resource. And if you're a district that does not have Cami right now, you actually do. Okay? You may not have it on your district purchase, but then go find out how many educators are using Cami. What if they all went towards that? It would enhance safety, security, and it would enhance collaboration and increase the wealth of your resources.
The other thing is, as far as security is concerned, you just have to make sure that, that you go slow with what you're doing. And, your systems, our systems and districts can't take a whole bunch of things all at one time and think that it's going to stay secure. We have to take things slowly, like how you sign on. Okay, take that piece. Make sure you have the appropriate ways that you sign on, and that the tools and the companies that you're working with have those same type of, that they have that secure system where that connection between those two entities are solid before you move on to another. I mean, all of those things are so important for school districts to take into consideration, especially when you're in, whether you're large or whether you're small, it doesn't matter. You can get breached any kind of way. But you definitely want to make sure that you're looking at the companies you work for, along with everything that Mike shared.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you just reminded me that often the breach is not somebody entering into the systems Often it's somebody entering through a personal relationship or asking for information, impersonating a company, what have you, and they then get into the systems that way. So it's difficult to defend, right? And I appreciate that you focus both on the technology tools being secure, but also making sure that people, employees, students, teachers in particular, really understand what to avoid and how to make themselves secure. That's great. Kind of wrapping up, I'm curious, when you think about technology, so this, you can be as wild as you want in your response here and as far forward thinking in your response, but what gets you excited about technology? And it could be teaching and learning technology, or we could broaden this. Are you excited about a virtual teacher in the future? Are you excited about something else? Like what gets you excited about the future of technology? So this is you being Nostradamus, I think is how you pronounce that individual's name. But what do you think? What gets you excited, Mike, about the future?
Well, again, when you track, my educational career of basically 40 years, and or you even go back to being a student yourself in high school or elementary, and you think of what's now happening in our classrooms, it's just so dramatic, and it's kind of a wonderful thought to try to project out. And it's weird because you used to think, well, I wonder what it's going to be like 20 years from now. Now we really kind of can get our mind blown away by just trying to envision what 5 years from now will look like. So, I think that, I'm going to be encouraged if we can make this feel like a smaller world and have, students that are in Wichita, Kansas, interacting with students that are in a very small community like Great Bend, Kansas. That's an hour and a half away from where Alicia's at. If they could be interacting and working on a project together in real meaningful ways, that'd be pretty darn cool. And doing those kind of things happening on a regular basis. The interaction again with the business community and what that will look like. I'm very excited about that because I think the whole career ed piece of having students being able to have a passion that they get to move towards and utilize the skills that they're excited about, and having them enhanced and getting to work with not only other students but with real business people. I think that's going to be exciting. And then the final thing that I would just share is that I think there's a magic sauce that we haven't explored that I'm hoping really improves and is needed more than ever. And Alicia brought it up way early in our conversation, and that is, how do we create a greater collaboration partner with our parents? And I want to make sure that means all of our parents, even the ones that maybe are challenged economically, that they have this ability to interact and find their place to help kids do math. A lot of times you get into 5th and 6th grade and people throw up their hands and say, hey, this is a whole different language for me. Well, that has to be on all of us, right? That should be a part of educators. That should be what we do with that. But it also needs to be a part of the ed tech companies of figuring out how we make it so that parents have an easier opportunity to be right there alongside their kids. So I appreciate Alicia initially stating that, and hopefully I enhance that a little bit.
Well, what gets me excited is still teachers. I want to make sure that we continue to ensure that students have a qualified, wonderful teacher in front of them every day, and that we don't use the technology to replace them, right? I think that that's critical for us to keep in mind. However, I do hope for the future that teachers utilize the tools as a place to give kids the opportunity to just dream and be big and create and problem solve problems, all those kinds of things that these tools are going to be used to be able to do. I believe that we'll eventually learn how to use these tools. All of the things that come so fast at us, we'll eventually learn how to use them. I believe the systems will be able to have the security infrastructures as companies continue to such as yours, continue to learn how to get us connected correctly so that we don't have those holes and gaps. I just think that we know what we need to do, and I think we'll begin to continue to do that. And I just see the future bright I just think opportunities exist, new learning, solving all kinds of problems in the health profession. I mean, just all these things that we want to happen for our world. I believe they will happen as long as we have a solid teacher and technology resource tools that we can keep secure. Once those things kind of stay aligned, I just think the world is, will be a better place.
You two are so positive. And that's great. And I appreciate that. And if I can add just in closing my own hope, and it links back to you two in particular and the districts that you help lead, is really, I hope that we see less of technology being put on top of school systems or brought to school systems, and more co-creation and design of what technology is going to be supportive and be designed for your districts and with your districts and teachers. And so hopefully we'll see more co-creation. There's some good examples of that, but hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and responding to some of these questions. And again, I think the future is certainly bright. And I'm glad you're both still very much a part of, the future for education, even as you've retired from your superintendency. So thanks so much for your time.